Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who will be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 330, with Montana Houston, head of rYOUminate, really interesting young startup in the life skills facilitation space. They just demoed at the South by Southwest EDU startup competition back in March, so got connected to her through that event and was really excited to chat with her for this episode. She has great energy, great enthusiasm, just a lot of passion and knowledge for this space that I believe will be continuing to be very important for institutions. A lot of students now kind of expecting institutions to invest in helping them grow their life skills, which we will get into for this episode, number 330, with Montana Houston. What I love about going to some of my kind of usual haunts, annual events that I like to go to, like South by Southwest EDU, is you meet a lot of great people there, but then also you open yourself up to a lot of connections of folks that you might have missed or folks who are just reaching out to record content. We'll do some of those at events and some of those virtually after the fact. And our guest today, Montana, she kind of just reached out and made a connection. We were ships passing in the night in Austin, but glad to have time with her to share more of what she's working on. So Montana, if you want to kick us off as we usually do, briefly introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background, and then we will go on to explain more about the work your organization does.
Absolutely. I'm Montana Houston. I'm from Seattle, though, from neither of those places, Montana or Houston. And I am a former paralegal turned first-time founder. I created a startup called rYOUminate, and we are a life skills education technology company using reflection to personalize life skills for 18 to 30-year-olds and the higher ed institutions that support them before 18 to 30-year-olds disengage. And I imagine I'll be talking a little bit more about what that is, but it's largely informed by my experience as a first-generation college student and just having so many questions, whether it was how do I apply to FAFSA, how do I write a college personal statement, and not having immediate people in my network or community that I could turn to show me the ropes through those things. And it has persisted throughout adulthood, and I finally, after talking with community, learned that this is something a lot of people have questions about. It really runs the gamut of more than just getting into school, and that's what started rYOUminate, being a resource that young adults can turn to for resources, but also equipping institutions to support them as well. So I am really excited to talk about that today, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and always just appreciate it happens more nowadays. I've seen some of the stuff you're posting on social and stuff. I had the same feelings in terms of certainly a lot of the life skills stuff, but also first generation, just kind of navigating things on my own, where I think that is like a powerful genesis for this work of the sort of hidden curriculum of higher ed. But yeah, I mean, there's just, I think, been a dearth of opportunities for young adults to really have opportunities to, and certainly how you framed it too, get what you need on demand or from different channels or whatever. Because some people might be like, yeah, my high school or whatever else actually did offer like a financial literacy thing and things like that. So if you want to explain a little bit more in detail exactly the work that you do, because I think from what I've observed, again, like you try to take every opportunity that you can to engage folks in this work, different settings and all that. Obviously, I think your core audience being young adults in college and that sort of thing. But yeah, just kind of elaborate on some nuances of the work you do, where you do it, how you do it.
You had so many gems that allows me to explain this a little better too, around how do we address the hidden curriculum of navigating adulthood and the systems that we're exposed to as part of adulthood. And just to use that as a segue into what rYOUminate does, we do address the hidden curriculum of, for traditional systems, in higher ed. It's getting the degree, getting a job, learning the skills that make people successful toward those endeavors. But there's often also, how do I navigate career services? How do I navigate getting a job for myself when I don't have career services on campus anymore to be able to show me the way? And how do I communicate the soft skills, essentially, that is part of each of those milestones beyond just the here's a resume, here's how to field certain interview questions. People have a lot of questions as young adults around what is a W-2? How do I fill that out? What is the right way to save for retirement? How do I have work-life balance? So rYOUminate uses reflection to teach financial literacy, career readiness and success, and social emotional relationships, that third piece. We want to do everything from health to wealth so that people can be well as they're trying to do well for themselves. But we have found that within our demographic, the institutions like public and private universities and the workforce development groups that we're supporting, they have an interest to start with financial literacy, of course, work in supporting their goals toward career, and the relational piece of how do people work within teams? What does leadership look like for this age range? And so that's why we focused in those areas, but really want to expand as time goes on. And the goal is that we can have people have confidence and self-awareness that supports the persistence and retention rates that these universities really care about. So our angle is, can someone feel confident with the information that they know and be able to advocate for themselves within the systems as they're working toward getting that first job and being able to be successful after post-secondary. So we specifically do it by personalizing life skills. We have a hybrid turnkey programming in person and online that helps personalize skill development and cohort management for the higher ed institution. So it feels like a personality quiz for young adults themselves, but then on the back end, there's a lot of great dashboards and data that we like to share. And we started out doing workshops, and I probably can talk about that a little bit more, but really wanted to develop it into something that can scale. And so it is an online platform with some in-person components, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think folks nowadays expect their institution to really kind of invest in them in these sort of, I want to say like tertiary ways, but it all obviously kind of intersects and blends and is symbiotic of the durable skills, soft skills, life skill, all this sort of terminology in it, but really just that idea of making sure that while you are here, you have everything that you need to be set up for success after you're done. I don't even think this really applies. I'm sure as you expand, you've maybe thought about this or anticipate it, like even for adult learners, because that might be where it's, yeah, I'm pursuing my first post-secondary credential, a prediction that I would make, because I don't see it as often as I would like. And I will completely acknowledge to the universe that I may not be looking in the right places, but I haven't seen the same like SEL kind of proliferation in higher ed as it has been in like K through 12, where I think there is still really great opportunities where in higher ed, you're likely testing a lot of the things that you're doing that SEL reinforced, where like you'd have an opportunity to like reflect on it versus it being maybe conceptual, or obviously just maybe like you're interacting with your classmates in elementary school or middle school and we're like, yeah, we're teaching you how to like be nice to people and communicate and share and those sort of things. So now it's like, yeah, I've kind of got some stakes here. I'm like at an internship that I want to do well in and be able to like speak confidently and be a good team player and those sort of things. So certainly a lot swirling in my mind around just, again, like the importance of this work. But before we get too far, acknowledging our initial connection through South by Southwest EDU, you participated in their startup competition. So you can talk a little bit more about that experience and what you took away from it.
Yes, so fortunate to be one of 12 organizations that was chosen as part of the startup EDU launch competition. And so we were able to pitch and demo as part of that event. And rYOUminate was one of two organizations from Washington State, the only one from Seattle. So I felt very
All right. Yeah, that's great.
excited and honored. But it was a global competition. So it was really cool to be able to participate. That experience, I think, just blew the doors open to response of life skills development and curriculum in higher ed. And it's something that's amazing to be able to interact directly with directors of student success, students directly at this conference, superintendents, executive directors, presidents, deans, all in the same place, and be able to ask questions and learn and just get so much demonstrated interest versus at I would say before South by Southwest, we had been part of conferences, but it was very much choose your own adventure. Like, how can I apply this to higher ed? How can I apply this to workforce development? And there were already tracks and conversations around durability skills and the space that we're in that it just felt like these are my people. This is the space I need to come back to. And it was so refreshing in that way versus trying to have to do some kind of education or even broader explanation when rYOUminate walks in a lot of spaces of what is this? What is the goal? Who is this for? I really found myself not having to do that at South by Southwest. And so that was incredible. As part of the competition, we were able to get exposure. There was like some press releases. There were opportunities, of course, like curated events like the launch spotlight where we got to just interact one-on-one with people coming by our table, which was loud, but also such a great opportunity because so much traffic was happening on the way to the bar.
Right, you're just
So it
waiting in
was,
line and you're like, hey, who are you? What are you doing?
yeah, that happened so often, and they're waiting for their drinks. They get their drinks, but they're still willing to talk to me, which was a win. It was really great, and I think was a more natural environment to participate in rather than having like really beating lights down. If it was like brighter and just a different and like atmosphere. So I loved it. I felt like there was really great conversations. And since then have been able to follow up with folks like you who I wasn't able to connect with because there were some conflicting. It was just such a packed event that I sometimes wasn't able to attend all the sessions or meet all the people I wanted to. But I noticed South by also attracts people who are just willing to connect with one another and learn with one another organically. So I've been having really great responses on LinkedIn or people at least accepting my invites to connect, which was refreshing.
Let's take a quick pause to talk about something big happening this summer, the Engage Summit 2026. The next era of higher ed isn't about adding more tools. It's about building the agentic campus, where AI works alongside your teams to recruit smarter, support students faster, and scale impact without burning people out. From real-world examples of agentic systems in action to hands-on sessions that show how AI can coordinate enrollment, marketing, advising, and operations, Engage Summit is where institutions move from experimentation to execution. If you're ready to design a campus where AI doesn't just assist, but instead acts, learns, and drives outcomes, then you'll want to be in Charlotte June 15th through the 17th. But it gets even better. As an Enrollify listener, you can grab your ticket for half off. Just head to engage.element451.com and use code Dustin50 to apply the 50% off discount. That's DUSTIN50. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, I do think, obviously, I think the person that is attracted to attending events like that, I think more likely than not, and hopefully are open to connections and conversations and that sort of thing. And for me, it is just sometimes give me a little dose of just like exposure for me of just, hey, what are people working on? But I think, yeah, the vibe and the interest and sort of backgrounds or functional areas of a lot of folks at South by Southwest EDU, as far as I've observed it, does feel like the kind of folks, that definitely kind of resonate with your work and everything. And the idea that you'd have pre-college, maybe folks in high school as they're maybe thinking about their options, folks in college, and then certainly maybe just other folks who would certainly want to help sponsor, want to get your kind of work out there if they're wanting folks to get financial skills. Maybe it is like a financial institution wants to leverage you and kind of your team to be the tip of the spear for that or something. But so I think, yeah, there's just a lot of good opportunities in an event like that. It's one of my favorites every year.
If I can add, I think you brought up such a strong point about the people that are attracted to attending South by Southwest EDU. I just, even from the air folks carried, I could tell everyone, whether they were a student, whether they work with students, had the passion to just make education something that people can take their goals and be able to thrive in whatever space, community colleges, higher ed, charter schools. It was just so powerful. And so to your point of why people have been, I think, interested in community and relationship building has a lot to do with maybe their personal ethos and their personal values. And it was just so great to be in that space where there was that almost shared goal of I'm here to learn, I'm here to connect, see how I can better pursue this mission of empowering students or helping them get to where they need to be. So yeah, to your point, lots of strong conversations. We launched an MVP while we were demoing with South by Southwest. And so a lot of interest in a pilot. And for folks who may not have been at a level where they were directly working with students, they took our personality quiz. We call it the life skills confidence check, but I like to anecdotally refer to it as a personality quiz. And we're just so interested in saying, I'm going to share this with my peers or my other classmates and what have you. So definitely can relate to your point of who's a champion because of the kind of environment that's created.
I feel like there's a lot more that I want to explore with this. Why do you think this issue persists?
Yeah. I think it stems from two places. One, a lack of infrastructure to address this kind of early independence, kind of 20s range, and the interesting needs that are part of entering adulthood. And I would say the second piece is a lack of capacity to build that infrastructure. So I guess I'll start with the second piece. There is an interest and growing awareness that soft skills, durability skills, social emotional learning overall is something that is of interest and actually retains students more than our traditional structures have done. And so whether it's learning financial literacy so that as students are getting their first part-time jobs or they're trying to get those volunteer opportunities that make them have stronger applications when they apply to colleges, that's something that we've seen legislation proposed that will make this a requirement as part of high school graduation, but they have yet, if at all, been actually enacted and required and implemented in schools. So that partially is a budget issue, partially it's the growing awareness of, oh, this is an oversight we've historically had as a society of after high school, how do people get these skills that they need? And now it's starting to garner enough attention that resources are being implemented, but maybe there's not yet the teams around it or the staff dollars around it to make it happen. And then the first piece of infrastructure for folks that maybe are able to reason or institutions that are able to reason, we need these things. It's really difficult to, if they're already a career services team and they have a caseload of individually meeting with over 100 students per career advisor, to then also say, okay, now go teach this workshop on how to set up a resume or to have an informational interview or to negotiate your first pay raise. That's asking a lot for a lot of groups. And sometimes young adults themselves don't know what they don't know, right? So I think it also is we're all figuring out what are those skills that are needed as young adults, and then institutions figuring out, given what we already have, whether it's staff-wise, curriculum-wise, how do we build this additional learning for folks to be able to close those gaps? The other piece I would say is that, unfortunately, there are opt-in or elective contingencies in getting this information. For example, I did have budgeting classes. I graduated from the University of Southern California, so I'm using that as like my lived experience, but I can also speak to this more industry-wide. There are classes like building a budget or life skills 101. That's something that's been catching fire at institutions nationwide, is the life skills 101 coding of it. But the opportunity to sign up for a class to learn how do I do my own accounting or how do I practice managing in real time. There are those kind of classes, but that depends on students having the time or the credit allowance or even just being aware to look for what other things are on the course catalog that aren't recommended to them by a college advisor or that's not in their kind of like rubric to graduate. So it's really choose your own adventure, which can be unfortunate for folks who don't know how to navigate those systems. So that's why we're really trying to focus on closing opportunity gaps and also making it turnkey. For those first two pieces of lack of infrastructure and ability to implement or capacity to implement, we're trying to take those two things away.
I knew going into that question the idea that this is like a systemic issue and the idea that it's been a stubborn one. And then even what you were challenging too, it's been a moving target. The idea, if you're talking about job search tips, it's like that continually is like a moving target in terms of, where you like walking in and just asking people, or you see a hiring sign in the window, looking at the classifieds and then all the different job boards and then just putting together a good resume, which like, again, even just as if you're like harkening back, was somebody making it on a typewriter? Were they literally writing it out? Or then like different word processing and formatting? And even then it's just the idea of there's the mechanisms of doing the thing and being like, I made a resume, and it's like, yes, you did, but you can make a better one. Like that is obviously, that's the 102 or 201 or whatever. I was like acknowledging scales. I've seen that kind of recognition and kind of evolution over time as you'll have a leadership program and they have a baseline kind of offering. But then, like, you need to build on it because I think, to your point, I think what I've seen, sometimes an institution might say we do Life Skills 101, and we'll maybe do it once a semester, which obviously not going to be super accessible. And then that's it. And they'll just be like, we did it before, right? We're good. They took it or whatever. But then it's with what you're doing, the kind of digital platform piece, the survey, the reflection, like all that kind of stuff, I think helps people, again, at a point well made of the like, unknown unknowns. I don't know what I don't know kind of thing. You might be like, I think I got a pretty good handle on like finances or whatever else. So I think my resume is pretty good or whatever. So trying to expose, maybe you do have a certain baseline of understanding, but based on kind of the information that you've provided to us and reflecting or whatever, like you might know certain things that you want to learn more about. But then on the other side, we would say, okay, we kind of rate you at this level. You might want to look into, provide you personalized recommendations on content, workshops, whatever it might be that we believe, or we may certainly know in some cases would like fill in some gaps for you and your knowledge and everything. So just speak more about that, the sort of getting behind the curtain, how digital platforms you feel can really help support moving this work forward to be more efficient and effective.
Digital platforms, I think, are the strongest way to have this life skill development at scale. And I can talk about that from a personal anecdotal standpoint and what I'm seeing more industry-wide. Starting with the personal anecdotal, rYOUminate actually started with workshops because if we think about life skills development, it's either on a one-on-one basis where it's like case management or coaching or just a one-to-one meeting with a coach or someone who has that information to help that individual streamline it. The other opportunity is courses overall, where maybe it's choose your own adventure, self-paced, on demand, and the third option, I think, is the live engagement group discussion learning. So we took the workshop standpoint to make it interactive, really community driven, because something we didn't talk about with the why it also persists is because it's almost a little shame driven around having the opportunity to name which life skills I'm missing and being able to ask for help. There's honestly, and maybe you can speak to this too, I think there is this expectation that once we're adults, at a certain point, post 18 for sure, but at some point between after graduating from high school, we're expected to know how to pay our taxes, how to lead a team, how to just be able to take care of ourselves more holistically. And there's not that much thought to how. And every person should have a specific tailored path to learning those skills, but that's not always possible on a one-to-one path or a one-to-one delivery. And it can be very difficult if it's also passive. Here's a course, figure it out yourself, but here's the information for you to learn it from. But not so much that feedback or not so much that space where I can say, I don't know how to do this, and someone else can share and knowing they don't know how to do it. And now I don't feel embarrassed and I don't feel alone or that I'm missing some secret information. So this digital scale is what's really important with these online platforms. I would also say that why we transitioned from workshops is because, speaking for myself, we're a small team. We have a chief operating officer, we have an intern, but I'm largely the person who's facilitating our workshops. And it can, as I'm sure anyone who does one-to-one case management, it can be very personally intensive from an energy standpoint to have multiple workshops a week, multiple workshops a month. And we had to pivot as a company. How do we do this on a wider scale where we're not going into more of a train the trainer or licensing company? So that's another reason why for ed tech, I want to emphasize more of the tech standpoint. How we're doing this digital platform is that we are essentially doing skill trees for 18 or 30-year-olds and having the institution, let's say it's a university, being able to direct based on needs, whether it's financial literacy is the topic that most people want support in, or it's the career readiness piece, they can opt into, here's a workshop that I want to lead for my cohort. Here's an article I want them to be able to access. Here's a video they can access. And there's office hours, and there's a few different things as part of our pilot that we help implement to really make it a huge support and a kind of self-sustaining ecosystem. And when we don't have a digital scale, we're trying to do that all in person. It might be more manual and it can take a lot more time. So that's how we're leaning into it. And we're also utilizing AI in some ways to help with the end user experience. We have parameters, we have frameworks that for every person that we interact with, they get their synopsis, they get their personalized needs assessment in a very unique way. I would say, hey, Amy, you're trying to lower your credit card balances this month. That doesn't need to sound that much different from, Amy, you said credit card balances is your top concern. Here's how we tackle it. The copy aspect, or actually saying those things and making it personalized, that's where we're leaning into AI, just so that people can have that specific interaction that's based on how they learn best. I would say overall, digital scaling is the way to go.
Yeah, because I think there, even with existentially higher education at this moment, a lot of students would prefer to study hybrid, try to get the best of both worlds. And I think even in this sort of microcosm, I think there's a way to get the best of both worlds, whether it's virtual live session, workshops, whatever, on demand, digital content library about things, and then having a AI chat that you could go back and forth on about, I want to learn more about something, here are good resources or whatever, things like that. But even, just the analysis where you could maybe get more nuanced on the intake side and kind of analyze and recommend, okay, now you've done these workshops and these courses. And that's where I think I've seen stuff like LinkedIn Learning. I remember back in the day when it was lynda.com. It was a great sort of little course library and stuff. And I think that's anymore probably where they've put a lot of their effort. The few times I've interacted with it is that idea of trying to just keep folks engaged and keep recommending more content to spend more time on their platform. But it's that idea too of, I think there's definitely a optionality overwhelm. It's just been stuffed to the brim with a bunch of random courses. And I don't know. So I think there's, that idea of being well informed at the beginning of where you are, where you want to go, and what we think that you should spend time on learning, and then having it with a lot of this kind of stuff integrated with hopefully your institution of higher learning in whatever way you're interacting with them, so that it could be tracked and understood and all that kind of stuff. But I think, again, another point well made that deserves to be bold, circled, underlined, that idea that so much of what you're focusing on trying to help folks learn is an assumed implicit outcome of just growing up. And I think that is having to continually challenge that assumption where, there's going to be a very uneven distribution. And something I say a lot is going to college should be this equalizing force. You should be able to get access to all the things that you need. It's just that idea of society benefits when people can manage their money better, people can communicate and work together better and all those sort of things. So I think that idea of finishing school, the idea of, because I think that's even that idea of liberal arts or whatever. It's we culturally feel these are things that people should know about history, the world, and whatever else. So that's why my brain goes towards that. But I think, the scaling is important because there's definitely going to be a lot of people that need help. And then there's a lot of individuality, and I need more of this, you need more of that, and those sort of things. You need to be able to just manage that more effectively on a digital platform.
To get back to your point around school being an equalizing force, because I think that is what a lot of young adults, or at least students, carry when they attend college. They're thinking, okay, I'm going to graduate with the skills that I need, the information I need, the community that I need. And I completely can understand your point, and also why it can be confusing or perplexing where folks are still graduating, but they're not necessarily getting certain skills that they need. And from what I heard, it comes back to what are our beliefs around education. Because if we have this idea, and it's definitely my ethos, that we're developing skills, we're developing knowledge as well when we're in educational institutions, then it only makes sense that as someone's graduating, they'll also have the skills they need to be able to handle anything around life. And definitely if they continue in academia. As part of going into college, they should know how to work within teams. They should know how to, if they have a work study job, balance school and work commitments, but it doesn't always end up that way. So I think that's actually such a great point that I know we don't have time to explore, but I think sometimes when I talk around durability skills or life skills, it's having to explain that piece of why does this exist? Where is the ball dropping? And it often comes back to what are our expectations around education, because education, I think right now operates that it expects students to learn these skills outside of what they're able to provide in their curriculum. And students are coming in with, I'm expecting to learn this from the college. What am I paying for if I can't be able to know how to pay my bills after graduating with all this debt? So it's really interesting that they're working at ends sometimes. And how can, industry partners, startups, what have you, move in to help close that gap?
Yeah, there's an expectation that institutions are helping with many of these things, if not all of them, most of them, certainly around, I think, the career prep side. And then even that idea of, if not before, then certainly at college, some of the other pieces around just the life skills and money management, whatever it is. But yeah, I think it is just an unfortunate casualty of these stubborn systemic problems and everything. But yeah, I think it's important, I think, for institutional leaders to be thinking through this. And this is a way that they could certainly make some adjustments or double down their investment in what maybe they're already starting with, kind of dipping their toes in the water with some out of the box life skills 101 kind of stuff, and give students more of what I think they feel as though is important kind of complements to their kind of core curriculum. And one of the other things I'm going to say too is it is an unfortunate thing that even in K through 12, a lot of students are like, why am I learning this?
Why am I learning geometry? I don't know how to file my taxes. That happens a lot, even though they're both important.
And I think there's, on one hand, it's okay, fine, teach geometry, make that more connected to the real world. And again, bringing us home here, wrapping up as we always do, always like to see how folks take this question. But from your vantage point, what advice would you give to higher ed leaders on this topic to wrap up the episode?
The largest advice I would provide is finding a case use for how to implement life skills into your programming, or finding an opportunity to bring in partners if you yourself do not have that capacity to implement life skills programming. And I think what we were just talking about, Dustin, ties this together so well, where students are graduating having questions about practical everyday tasks, whether it's taxes, whether it's understanding how to deal with someone on their team and they're not sure how to communicate, that there might be a little friction there. There are these everyday occurrences that universities, higher ed institutions are aptly positioned to handle, right? Students work in teams all the time. How can we relate this to, this is how it might look in the workplace, or this is how it might look in your community? And using that opportunity, using those captive audiences of young adults wanting to know what comes after college and being able to bridge those two together. I want to also leave us with some data that I did not bring up earlier in this conversation, where there was a study on social emotional learning overall. Happy to share this in maybe the episode notes, but 76% of institutions, these are colleges of public and private nature and community colleges, 76% have an interest in developing social emotional learning, but only 26% actually have the capacity to implement it, where they have budget set aside or teams ready to deliver that offering. And so that's a large chunk of our higher ed institution industry, right? A lot of people listening might be in that position where they're saying, we've identified this need, but we're not able to implement it just yet. And so where can that partnership come in? Because this is affecting almost 76 million young adults in the US, in the Gen Z age range. 8 out of 10 young adults feel they don't have the life skills they need by the time they graduate higher ed. So there's just an opportunity to either look into some things that can be licensed or hopefully bring in partners like rYOUminate to have life skills be approachable, accessible, and relevant to young adults today, because even our economy looks different than my parents' generation who is trying to enter jobs for the first time.
Yeah, I think that is a good way to summarize, close everything up, and like a call to action, the sort of like incongruence of identifying like a problem. And so like institutions understand, but have some room to grow there and, address that need and desire from the students. So I think that framing and hopefully it helps motivate and inspire the folks listening to commit to this work. And just appreciate you and your time and all that you shared. Ways to connect with you and rYOUminate in the episode description. And certainly if you want to share that data point as well, we can link out to that for folks to check out at their leisure. But just good talking to you.
Thank you so much, Dustin. This was truly a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.